It's a great day. My name is Shay Brown, the Happy Entrepreneur, and welcome to the Happy Entrepreneur Show, the #1 business development and revenue focused late night show in the country where we're on a mission. And our mission is to empower, our mission is to inspire, and our mission is to provide you, that's right, you, the hardworking entrepreneur, with all of the resources that are necessary to execute that big vision you have for the people you were called to serve. And on this particular episode, we have the one and only Nick Klingensmith. Did I get that right?
You did. You nailed it.
He's in the building today. What's going on, Nick? How are you?
I am just happy to be here. And yourself?
Good. Happy to have you here, man. Thanks for Robert Foster, a cool guy, connecting us together, man. And people are looking at your bio. They'll read that. They're seeing how cool you are. And they're seeing the topic. And they're saying, okay, wait a minute. My first question, and just to address the elephant in the room, why do people struggle so much with overcoming fear? Let's start there. Based on what you know in the world, why are people so stuck with just fear?
You know, this is good. We can go down this rabbit hole all day, but I'll try to keep it brief. The #1 reason that people are struggling with fear today is because of their inability to name it. It's eluding them. We're feeling uncomfortable. We're feeling stressed. We're feeling disconnected from things. We're also met with just overwhelming information between social media and all the red dots that are out there. And it's causing us to be afraid to lose the things that we have, but it's also more so causing us to be afraid to show others what we don't have. And on that, I'm talking about knowledge and skill and experience.
Now, when you mentioned knowledge, skill, and experience, you talked about social media. Just for a moment, we'll slow down, then speed up. What do you suggest, or how do you not compare yourself? Because sometimes I'm looking at social media, even now, I'm like, whoa, I'm doing a podcast, but I got 3,000 downloads. This other guy's over here is getting 25,000 downloads a day. They seem so happy on vacation. How come I don't seem that happy? As I have a way sometimes, I know it's not perfect, but I'm comparing myself. So my question to you is, what do you do and what do you suggest to folks so they don't fall themselves into that comparison perspective as it relates to social media?
You know, not just in social media, but the comparison is a slippery slope no matter how you toss the dice, right? When I look at athletics and stuff like that, it's real easy to look at the person who's ahead of me and start being, I guess, just envious, which turns to critical feelings, whether it be about ourselves or it might even start putting the other person down. So it goes the other way too, is because then we see somebody who's maybe not keeping up and we'll use that as a reason to justify some of our own behavior, or we'll judge those other people to make ourselves feel better. So comparison is just dangerous all around. And in business, and especially when you're doing things like entrepreneurship, where there's that just big, giant blank space in front of you, and there's not always a roadmap, it's so dangerous to compare ourselves to other people, to other organizations. So right now, that's all I have. I left corporate America 2 months ago to pursue my speaking and coaching career. And in that time, all I see are the professional, well-known motivational speakers. I see everybody with, professionally done content and videos. And I'm over here with my phone, and it's real easy to feel like you're sitting at the kiddie table. But if I do that, I'm not going to take the confident actions that I need to in order to succeed. So what do I do on a daily basis? I put the blinders on. I know, and I have a purpose. I have a belief. I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I make a plan and I stick to that plan without looking for those other without acknowledging even those other outside influences. And I'm not saying it's a perfect science, because it happens all the time, right? But if you can do it in short pockets of time, it allows us to continue to move forward.
Now, we got fear, overcoming fear, and then you have rejection. And rejection means different things to different people. Take a moment and give your definition of rejection and why that's so important. Ladies and gentlemen, don't worry. In a moment, we're going to find out who this character is. We're going to see what his story is. We're going to get to that. But I'm just curious. He has rejection down, so we can all be on the same page. So here's the question. What does rejection mean? What does it look like? And why is it so important?
Well, I think something you just mentioned is going to make a lot of sense, where it is going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? It's one thing if I ask someone for a job or out on a date or something like that and they say no, that's an easy rejection. That's something that's tangible. It's a yes or no thing that we understand. It's another thing when my expectations are being rejected, or when my desires, or if I feel rejected simply because maybe I'm not being validated by those who I hold in higher regard. So the thing about fear is fear is a self-created excuse, whereas rejection exists only when we don't like the reaction of another person. Fear is more internal, but rejection is when we are reacting to someone else's reaction of us or our actions.
I love it. So well said, by the way. So now the question I know you've been waiting for, folks been waiting for, who is this person, Shay? What is his backstory that led him to doing what he's doing now? Talk to us, my man.
Well, the least exciting part about me is I'm a 20-year sales veteran between telecommunications and logistics. I've held executive positions, vice president, but all in the sales customer facing realm. However, in addition to that, I'm also a 4-time cancer survivor. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I have 7 herniated discs. I have nerve damage, sleep apnea. I have attitude problems. There's something else I'm probably leaving out. And on top of that, I became an obstacle course racer and defied everything that I just told you about.
Well, you can't leave us hanging. I mean, you can't just leave us hanging. So you defied everything that you told us about. How were you able to bounce back from this, my friend? And what got you? Let me just ask the question directly. What got you first into the sports arena? I mean, you got a lot of things going on there. You mentioned, okay, so people are wondering, okay, Shay said he was drinking, got that, Shay, but then he said he had these other problems, got that. Then why would anyone go out and decide they're going to compete and run a marathon, which seems like an act of God? So what took you to doing it? And you talked to a guy that's run 5 marathons, right? Marine Corps marathon. So I'm a runner. I love what you're doing. But what was the transition that said, let me go out there and I can do this?
So I had I'm just going to say I got it handed to me for a couple of years. From about 2005 to about 2008, I got cancer twice. I got diabetes. That's when I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. That's when I got my shoulder surgery and my nerve damage. And I lost my sister. So there was like that 3-year period where the world was against me, the universe was against me, and I just felt like a victim. And for a while, that was my fuel, that was my power, that was my identity, that's what I held on to. But I got a bit of a reprieve from bad things happening to me, so I decided to, really lean into it and see if I can't mess up my own life. And that's when I was just in the throes of alcoholism. From probably that period of maybe 2010 until I got sober in 2014, alcohol became more and more controlling of my life, of my decisions, of my personality. And in 2013, I got cancer again for the 3rd time. Only this time, they told me they couldn't operate. There's a tumor in my neck. It's deep embedded against the vocal cords. They didn't want to operate. There was a couple other possible medical procedures they could have done to do something with it, but all of them held a substantial amount of risk. And so the way I looked at it at the time was this. I said, so you're telling me I have inoperable cancer? That means there's only one thing left to do, and that was drink. And so I used that last cancer, or it wasn't even the last cancer, my 3rd cancer, as an excuse to, F the world and just go down into this dark abyss where I could isolate and just surround myself by alcohol and bad decisions. And that's what they led there. It wasn't long once I was able to really just kind of take the gloves off and jump into my drinking. It wasn't long until that manifested into a very public catastrophe. I was supposed to be the keynote speaker at a company conference in Vegas. This is 2014. And the night before the conference, I ended up getting drunk. I ended up getting in a fight. I ended up getting thrown out of the hotel where I was supposed to be given a speech the next day. So instead of being on stage, I had to go home on a plane in disgrace. I was lucky to keep my job. I was lucky to keep my girlfriend at the time. And I got home on July 13th of 2014. And the very next day I started my sobriety journey, and I haven't looked back. But that wasn't enough. The universe wasn't quite done with me yet. I had this nice 2-year period where I kind of thought all the bad things were behind me, and I was working on being sober, working on being a better person, personal growth. And that's when I got cancer for the fourth time. This time it was different. It was a nodule in the back of my head. It wasn't related to the other ones. And so this one kind of took me by surprise. This one actually had me off my game and had me scared. I didn't want to talk about it with people. The first couple times I had cancer, I was a cancer warrior. This time I was convinced something bad was going to happen. I didn't know why I was in this dark place. I had everything going for me. And so when I actually beat it that time, and they took it out without having it, they did surgery in the back of my head, and they didn't have to do any chemo, any radiation. It was a very simple procedure. And so when I left Moffitt Cancer Center that day, I had an all clear. And it was the first time in my entire experience with cancer that somebody said, "You're all clear, you're healthy." And about 3 weeks after that, my boss walks into my office and he says, "Hey, I want to do a Spartan race at the end of the month, and I want you to do it with me." I looked at him and I'm like, no, 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 fuck no. No way. An 8 to 10 mile trail race with obstacles and mud? Impossible. And to train for this, I don't want to be that uncomfortable. I never wanted to be that uncomfortable. And so I went home that night, and that's when I was thinking about it. I had just been promoted at work. I was 2 years sober. I had a new relationship with a great girl who's my now wife, and I had just beaten cancer decisively for the fourth time. And yet something was missing from my life. I had a tension and an uneasiness feeling about me, and I realized I already was that uncomfortable. I was in the best position out of anybody I knew, and I was uncomfortable. And so I decided to take my friend up on that challenge to do our Spartan race 9 weeks later. And that was 7 years and 97 Spartan races ago.
What was the mindset like just to go out there the first time? And the reason I'm asking that question, there might be some folks out there that they're listening and they're thinking, man, Shay, I like what I'm hearing from Nick. There's some things that I need to take that first step on. So I'm wondering, what was he thinking when he first started training? What was he feeling like? And then how did he push through the barrier when he thought to himself, maybe I should quit? Or maybe he never thought you should quit. I don't know. We're going to find out in a minute. So 2-part question. Mm-hmm. First part is, what were you thinking? What were you feeling when you were showing up to do the training? Because that's a mindset, and someone needs to get going right now. And then number 2, someone else is at the point where they're like, no one cares if I go for a run today. No one cares if I drink a gallon of water. Do I have to do this today? And they're at the point where they're teasing. So 2-part question. Number 1, what were you thinking when you got started? And number 2, what was the motivation that kept you going when you could have quit at any point in time?
So for the first part, getting started was actually the most uncomfortable thing I had ever done in my life. As much as I just told you about all the medical ailments, and we haven't even talked about like my origin story, but to train for the race meant I was going to set my alarm for 5:15 a.m. and wake up before work to run, which at that point in my life was unheard of. I have never been the guy who wakes up in the morning without an alarm, birds are chirping, I'm just happy to be alive. That's not me. I can sleep. I can hit snooze. And so for me to wake up before work and train was the most uncomfortable decision and action I had ever taken in my life. But I only had to do it once because I made a commitment. I signed up for this race. There was 5 of us who were going to do it. And I didn't want to let them down. And for me, right now, 7 years later, I often race in the competitive division. I'm not a threat to anybody's podium. But at the time, it wasn't about my time. It wasn't about how good I'm going to do on the obstacles. It was about survival. This was a life-changing thing for me. And that's how I looked at it. I had played the victim and the patient for so long in my life. Just simply registering for the race, just simply waking up that next morning, I took so much ownership over my old life. And so I was committed to the purpose. It wasn't about a race for me. I was committed to doing this thing with everything I had to get it done. And there was never a moment in that race or anything leading up to it that made me want to quit. But there was a time where I had a wake-up call, maybe about a month and a half in, where I thought I was doing really great. I'm like, all right, I'm going to crush this thing. And then I went out and trained with one of my buddies who was just in significantly better shape than me. And it was humbling. It was very humbling. That was a doubt moment along the way. And like all the doubt moments that come, though, is if you commit to something that is aligned with your purpose or has a higher purpose, you just keep moving forward because the doubt, action conquers all doubt.
I love it. And you mentioned something about origin story. And as you was talking, I was thinking, origin story? Did we miss that? Did we miss the origin story, ladies and gentlemen? I love the example. Thanks so much. His company is called Stride Motivation, by the way. And you can see why, because you have to take these strides to get there. I'm going to ask him what the backstory is that is. But tell us your origin story. Since we didn't get the origin story, I thought the origin story was in the other part. So Shay Brown, as a host, don't miss that. What's the origin story, Nick? Talk to us.
So I didn't have like an after school program type of childhood. All right. But I did grow up with parents in recovery, or at least one parent in recovery and one parent maybe trying. And from a very early age, I didn't realize this until I was older, but from a very early age, I was rejected from my parents' love. And I didn't, you talked about fear earlier. We have to name it. We have to face it. Right. And the same with rejection. I have to accept the fact that this happened and it affected me, and it affected how I grew up. It affected how I viewed the world. It reflected how I viewed interactions with other people. And so I grew up with this chip on my shoulder, and I grew up feeling like this scared little kid internally, but that's not what I wanted to show on the outside. And I do think that led to a lot of different things. I think that was definitely a contributing factor to my alcoholism and to my drinking, is the fact that I was trying to mask this, not just the feeling, but the outward appearance. So I did not realize just how fearful I was in my life until recent times. And that is another benefit of something that having done obstacle course racing has showed me, is it's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle. And it's one that constantly requires introspection and self-reflection. So these are lessons that I continue to learn. It's like I opened up Pandora's box and now I don't know what's going to come out of it.
Thanks for sharing, man. I love it. I love how you're so authentic. I love how you share where you've been and where you're going. So for the person that's listening, this is, wow, Shay, what are some affirmations? What are some mindset things that Nick is telling himself on a daily basis that allows him to stay in this space? And here's a guy who was in sales. Okay, that was interesting. Who's now doing this? That's even more interesting. Who now has to go walk the walk. So what's the question to you, Nick? It's, what's some of the mindset? What are maybe 3 affirmations you use for your mindset? And number 2, because you can use 2-part questions, what do you do on a continuous basis to stay there, to stay in that space?
Well, as far as, mantras or things I say to myself, I tell everything in stories. There was an obstacle course race I did this summer. It was in Cincinnati. Well, actually, it was in over the border in Indiana. They called it Cincinnati, but there's a ski mountain there. I forget the name of it. And we were carrying a 60-pound sandbag up the face of the mountain. It was extraordinarily steep. It had been raining. It was humid. It was very slippery. Racers were kind of falling all over themselves, trying to get the sandbag up and down the mountain. And something that I would normally carry on my shoulder and just carry up the mountain, I'm deadlifting this thing, and I'm pushing it up the mountain 3 or 4 inches at a time. This was physically miserable. And it just seemed like it just seemed impossible because it was going to be forever. And so I literally out loud just kept saying, like the little engine that could, I kept repeating, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Over and over and over again until I was done with the obstacle, because every moment I was saying, no, I can't. It was too hard. Why am I doing this? What bad decisions did I make in my life? But so yes, I can. Yes, I can. So right now, well, I'm an entrepreneur and building my speaking business, and there's no roadmap for me. And there's a lot of blank space. There's a lot of doubt. I have to just remind myself every single day, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Another one that I live by is that if you stop here, you die here. And this was from another time where, as a diabetic, when I was early in my endurance racing and learning how to go for long runs, I was maybe went for a 7 or 8 mile run, and about halfway from home, so a good 4 miles from home, I only had 1 gel packet, and my blood sugars just absolutely crashed and plummeted. I was walking home. I was blacking out. I wasn't lucid. I'd black out and I would come to 20 or 30 feet in front of where I was. And anytime I came to, I just literally said out loud, keep moving. If you stop here, you die here. Because, and that's a metaphor for life, because if you don't like where you are right now in your business, your relationships, your friends, if you don't like physically where you are right now, if you stop here, this is it. This is your coffin. This is where you die. And so if you stop here, you die here. Um, as far as things I do every day, these are things that I have to practice. Number one, and I think this is true for anybody, is you have to have an alignment of purpose. You have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that was one of the things that was killing me in, my corporate job, is I tried to align my purpose of doing my corporate activities to fulfilling my life, but that's a long walk sometimes. So by knowing what I'm doing on a daily basis, or why I'm doing what I'm doing, there's a lot you can endure. I love it when people tell me, oh, I couldn't do the things you do. And I'm like, if your kids were on the other side of that fire, I guarantee you could. It's just that your why wasn't great enough. On top of that is I have to own the responsibility. I have to own the circumstances as they present themselves to me. I don't have any time to sit around and say, man, I wish things were different, or I wish this person would do that, or I wish this would happen. The situation is what it is, and I have to accept that. You have to remain adaptable, because challenges are going to present themselves throughout the course of the day, throughout the course of your journey. And if we refuse to grow and adapt, they're going to move on without us. One of the other key things is I do have to remind myself those mantras. I have to remind self-belief. And so I do a lot of visualization. I do it when I'm running. If you look at any of the 30-second short motivational videos that I do every day, they're always at the end of my workout, because that's when the blood's pumping. So I go out and run for 45 minutes to an hour, and that's just where the messages begin to hit me. But during that run, I'm visualizing a couple things. I'm visualizing myself on stage, motivating people. I'm visualizing myself hugging my wife at the end of something. I'm celebrating in my head, because I want this belief to be so real and so true that all of the other things that happen to me don't have as much power over me.
As you were speaking and you were sharing that, one, thanks for being so authentic again. And I'm curious, it's one of my favorite questions to ask as we're coming down the home stretch, but I was going to ask, what's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever been given? You're sharing so much from inside you, right? And I like to frame the conversation, which is we've had so many mentors along this journey of life, right? Success is a team sport. If you had to reach out and just grab one idea from one of the mentors or one of the lessons you learned on this life that you want to pass on to us, the audience, and you at home, you listening, wherever you are, you get to lean in right now, because this is an opportunity. You get to share and walk away with something that's near and dear to Nick that you can now use for the rest of your life. So here's the question. What is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever been given?
It's completely left field from everything we just talked about, and it wasn't his quote, but my old boss once told me, and he paraphrased the quote, that you can measure a person's success by the number of uncomfortable conversations they're willing to have. And every time I step into a tough conversation, whether it be I'm the one who's about to get spoken to tough, or the one that I'm going to have to be tough, or that there's just a tough consequence, whatever it is, anytime I'm in one of those conversations, I remind myself of that, because it's a way of it disconnects me emotionally from the result of the conversation. I'm reminded that my job is to have it, rather than mull about or get myself twisted into what all the things that might go wrong. You can measure a person's success by the number of uncomfortable conversations they are willing to have, and I am willing to have a lot of them.
Yeah. What do you do for fun, man? When you're not out with the wife, walking on the beach and hanging out and running and so forth, what do you do to unwind? What do you do for fun these days?
Well, first, training is fun for me. It is. I enjoy training. I enjoy racing. I go distance and ultras and stuff like that. So I don't have a lot of high intensity, hate myself type of workouts. So I really do enjoy feeling alive like that. I spend a lot of time wasting my life. But my wife and I do like to go to theme parks. We like to do fun things, and we race. We travel for races, and we try to make them race weekend experiences. So I enjoy local ice cream at various places. We like watching movies. But probably the greatest area of my release is dogs. just playing with the dogs, taking the dogs to the beach, taking them to the dog park. I think that anybody who's ever stuck in a rut just needs a dog.
I love it, man. I'm a dog lover. What's one of the best places you've enjoyed traveling? You travel all over the place, by the way. And I'm just curious, is one pop in mind? You're like, Shay, this was a great weekend getaway for my wife and I. We loved it, whether it was a race or not. Since you get to do so much traveling, we're just all nosy right now. We're all just curious.
Best trip I ever took was with my wife, and it was to Greece. We were there for about 2 weeks. We were there for a race. That's when we actually I proposed to her.
All right now.
If you were to do a weekend getaway type thing, Cuba. We did 4 days in Havana in 2017, and it was just absolutely amazing. I live in Florida, so it took me longer to get to the airport than it did to get from Tampa to Havana. But for a very quick trip, I think that was just such a remarkable experience. And I know whatever the regulations are, shrink and expand, but should you ever have the opportunity to go, it is something I highly, highly, highly recommend for anybody.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm named after Che Guevara, so I'm looking forward to it, obviously, as well. That's my name, Che Brown. On the behind you, we're nosy. There's a person running. I think that's you, and then there's another thing behind you. So there's one that's black that we can't see, and then they're there. Tell us the significance of you in the orange shorts. I mean, that's right there at the top, by the way. What is that about? Why is that there?
All right, this one right here. This one right here is the 2018 Boston Marathon.
Congratulations.
Which was my first marathon. I ran it for charity, which is how I got into it. And it was arguably the worst weather conditions in the history of the Boston Marathon. It was 18 degrees at the start. It was 40-mile-an-hour headwinds and torrential downpour the entire time. So that was me coming down, celebrating down Boylston. And if you can look, that's a real thin shirt I'm wearing there. So, I mean, I wasn't able to open my own gels towards the end because my fingers were frozen to my hands. It was both the most miserable and incredible experience of my life. And
you said, I'm finishing this thing, baby.
What's that?
You said, I'm finishing this race.
Well, earlier I mentioned about visualization, right? And for 90 straight days, all I could see while I was meditating and stretching at night and every single day while I ran, all I could see was me coming and celebrating down Boylston Street. So when I showed up to Hopkinton that day, it didn't matter because I had seen and felt, I'd already run the marathon 100 times in my head. I literally did not know how to quit. And trust me, if there was a way to my hotel, I mean, thank God Boston's a point-to-point course because there was no other way to a shower besides straight. But it was brutal.
And what is the baseball one up top? Looks like a red one. It looks like it has baseball, like someone sliding into home plate or something up there. What is that about?
That would be Dave Roberts, the steal. Arguably the most pivotal moment in at least modern Red Sox history when Dave Roberts stole second base in the 2004 ALCS versus the Yankees.
That's cool, man. This is so cool. Look, man, as we come down the home stretch, I wish we could go all day long. I know our time has expired. 2-part questions. We come down the home stretch. Number 1, what type of clients are you looking to work with these days, if any? And number 2, how can folks connect with you? How can they stay in the conversation over and beyond the time that you and I have now?
Number 1, I am actively looking for speaking engagements where I can share my story in the hopes of inspiring others. So whether it be these are corporate events or, even small group events, those who could benefit from a high tempo pep talk. Secondly, is I am offering coaching programs specifically on developing a resilient mindset and developing a resilient team, specifically for remote sales professionals. I am everywhere on the internet at Stride Motivation, and the website is stridemotivation.com.
Well, let me say thank you so much, man, for being on the Happy Entrepreneur Show. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Shay. This has been great.
And thank you to viewers. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. We appreciate every like. We appreciate every comment that you make and that you share with us. Without you, there would be no show. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'd like to remind you, every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I never get tired of reminding that you are so freaking incredible, that you are so amazing, that you've got so much potential inside of you. You're making a huge difference in the world, and that today in fact, is your January 1st. And because of just that one reason, your best is still yet to come. Doesn't that feel good? Your best is yet to come. Your best is still yet to come. My name, well, it's still Shay Brown. It hasn't changed. The Happy Entrepreneur. Make it a great day, everyone. And I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, we'll make some good things out. We connect again next time. God bless. Peace. Bye-bye. So long, Nick. We out, everybody.